Today on History's Tech, we are looking at the Panzer V, otherwise known as the Panther tank. Now, the Panther was designed to serve a dual purpose. One, it was designed to be the tank to combat the Soviet T-34 directly, and also end up replacing the Panzer III and Panzer IV, which, as I talked about previously, were basically the workhorses of the German army in the 1930s and early 40s. But let's go ahead and look at a tank that was mechanically flawed from the start and actually did get fixed, still ended up being problematic for the German army during World War II. Now, as I've stated before, the Panzer series of tanks came about as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, which limited the production of arms for the German army after World War I. Now, when the Germans began working on it and kind of in secret, they did develop two early tanks, and this is the Panzer I and the Panzer II. And of course, these were not really supposed to be combat tanks. They were more training tanks and temporary tanks until the Panzer III and IV were ready. And as I've stated, the Panzer III and IV were the workhorses of the German army. However, after Operation Barbarossa, which is the German invasion of the Soviet Union, the Germans are going to encounter the KV-1 and the T-34 tank. And they are going to be shown that the early Panzers 1 through 4 are ineffective against these tanks. Now, the Germans basically have two options. They can upgun the Panzer III and the Panzer IV, which is what they began doing, or they can go ahead and create a new tank specifically to take on the T-34. Now, the initial plans to replace the Panzer III and Panzer IV was known as the VK-20 series, and this was to be a track tank weighing about 20 tons, and they actually got Krupp, Daimler-Benz, and MAN to begin drawing up plans for this. However, it was quickly realized that this wasn't going to work, and they abandoned the VK-20 series in favor of a newer, heavier tank. It was supposed to be at least 30 tons and be able to counter the T-34 and KV-1 directly. So Daimler-Benz and MAN each designed their own unique tank, and this became the VK-30s. Now, the two designs ended up going head-to-head against each other. The Daimler-Benz version basically resembled a T-34. It also was powered by a diesel engine, something that actually Adolf Hitler favored and wanted more in his tank. The MAN was more conventional. It was something that the Germans were used to developing. It had a standard gas engine and was more along the lines of what they were used to and wouldn't have to re-gear everything to this. In the end, the MAN design is the one that's going to win out, basically because it could use a slightly modified version of an existing turret. It used the Maybach V12 engine that was in the Tiger ones that were being developed. So they wouldn't have to completely redesign their manufacturing, and they could just go ahead and use existing parts. So with that, the Panzerkampfwagen 5, the Panther tank, was put into production. And it is here where the problems with the Panther truly begin. They were plagued with a ton of mechanical issues. The engines were known to overheat, partially due to the fact that the engine bays were designed to be sealed so they could drive through rivers because the tank was too heavy to cross a lot of bridges. They leaked oil like you wouldn't believe. The carburetors had problems. They had gasket failures. The engines were known to catch on fire. Transmissions and final drives broke down. So they weren't mechanically reliable. Very similar to what we'll see with the Tiger when I talk about that here in the near future. In its first combat experience at the Battle of Kursk in the summer of 1943, they were shown to be incredibly unreliable. Basically, 50% of the vehicles that arrived to the battlefield were inoperative, two-thirds of them because of engine breakdowns, one-third because of transmission problems. Fuel pump failures also caused another set of problems for these tanks. The operational rate by the end of July of 1943 was only 16%. Now, in order to make the tank actually reliable, in order for it to be combat effective, they had to take a lot of measures. The biggest one was completely removing the original engine and replacing it with a much more reliable motor, the HL-230. They also began better training drivers and commanders to start putting in better reliability, to properly treat the vehicle, even get preventative maintenance in order to extend the life of the vehicle. Now, while all of this did improve the reliability of the vehicle, it wasn't perfect. It just improved its performance capabilities. And even though it was really able to show that it could take on Soviet armor in pretty much any field, because of it still having reliability problems, when the Germans lose the Battle of Kursk and they begin basically to retreat against the Red Army, the tanks are not going to be utilized as properly as they should be. In fact, they're basically going to be taken on constantly. They're going to be captured. They're going to be utilized by the Soviet army. and they don't become that effective in the Eastern Front. Now, during the Western Front campaigns, the Panthers are going to face their own issues. Initially, during the invasion of Normandy, there weren't a lot of Panther units in France. They went from about 156 to 432 by the end of July of 1944. A majority of these were deployed in and around Normandy to kind of push back forces there. And we're going to see them really engage Allied forces at the Battle of Caen, where they're going to go up against Canadian and British units, fielding things like Shermans with 17-pound guns and U.S. supplied M10 tank destroyers. We'll see the Sherman Firefly go up against the Panther. Now, this area where the Battle of Caen takes place, honestly, the Panther should have had the advantage. This is big open fields. They can engage from a long distance and take out Allied firepower. However, the usage of the 17-pounder against the Panthers, and the fact that the Panther's greatest weakness was that its armor on its sides was incredibly thin for its size, even a standard Sherman could take it out from a distance, usually relatively closer, if they could hit it in the side. So the Panther should have had the advantage, but sheer numbers and the layout of the area they were in kind of limited the capabilities of the Panther there. Follow this with the Ardennes offensive, which once again should have given the Panther the advantage, as this was an area with a large amount of open country where it could have shown off its ability to fight at long distance. However, being in the Ardennes area with a lot of small towns, they were very vulnerable for up-close attacks, and a lot of them were destroyed in this offensive. During Operation Grief, they actually tried to disguise Panthers as M10 tank destroyers by welding additional plates and applying American camouflage. But the tanks were actually detected and destroyed before they had a chance to actually do any real damage. After this, it pretty much signals the end of the Panther. Most of them are going to be transferred to the Eastern Front by February 1945. The Allies had figured out how to take down the Panthers, utilizing Shermans with experienced crews and numerical superiority. And with the inability to actually produce larger numbers of tanks, the Germans were basically at their end. Now, even though it is the third most produced armored fighting vehicle of the German military at this time period after the Panzer III and Panzer IV, there's not a lot of variants of this tank, mainly because of the time frame it came in towards the end of the war. Some of those limited variants include the Birch Panther, which was basically an armored recovery vehicle, the Jagd Panther, which was a self-propelled anti-tank gun on a Panther chassis. We had artillery observers, radio communication variants, and then we had some one-off ideas that were kind of out there utilizing the Panther chassis. You had the Sturm Panther, the Flaken Panthers, the Gerard Panthers, which was like field howitzer variants. Some of them were designed to carry incredibly large field guns. And there was even an attempt to build an up-armored version of the Panther known as the Panther II that never went beyond 2 prototype tanks before it was abandoned in front of what was known as the E-50 Standard Panzer project. Now, after the war, a few countries did actually utilize the tank. Romania was given a few of captured Panthers from the USSR. The French actually used it till 1952 as a main tank, and the Swedish actually sent a group to France to evaluate the Panther that they had in their units. And they actually did utilize a few of them for testing, and they continued to test them until 1961. Now, there are more than 20 museum-quality Panthers in existence to this day, with 6 of them at the time of this recording in operational order in one way or another. But there you have it, a look at the Panther tank, a tank which really, in all honesty, had the potential to be something amazing for the Germans. But due to production issues, material problems, honestly, it was fielded at the wrong time of the war. It really could have given the Allies a run for their money had it not been for so many problems for this tank. And in all honesty, we're very lucky for all those problems. But that's it for today. I thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you the next time when I talk about the Tiger tank.